You were not supposed to find this by accident. Something in you is already rejecting the life you've been told to call normal, and that rejection is not a malfunction. It is not burnout. It is not random anxiety. It is not you becoming unstable. It is the first crack in a system that only works if you stay spiritually numb. The part nobody tells you is this: some truths are not forgotten naturally. They are buried on purpose. And Sophia, the name they reduced to myth, symbol, and old religious debris, belongs to one of those truths. Because Sophia was never just a story from ancient ruins. She was never just a poetic goddess of wisdom filed away with dead languages and broken temples. In the hidden current of Gnostic thought, Sophia is what returns when the spell of false reality starts breaking. Not only in the cosmos, in consciousness, in you. And if you've been feeling strange lately, if your old life has started to taste flat, if conversations that used to feel normal now feel empty, if the noise of the world has become almost physically painful, if something in you keeps whispering that you cannot go back to the version of yourself that used to tolerate all this, then hear me carefully. You are not imagining it. You may already be feeling the first movements of remembrance, and once you see what those movements are, you cannot unsee them, because this is not just about an ancient teaching. This is about why your nervous system has been under siege, why your attention feels hunted, why your soul feels irritated by things other people still call success, and why a buried intelligence may be rising in human beings right now. This is not entertainment, this is recognition. So as you listen, don't just agree or disagree. Notice what reacts in you. Notice what tightens. Notice what becomes suddenly clear. Something in you already knows why this found you. The forbidden premise is simple, and once it lands, the rest of the world starts rearranging around it. Sophia was not merely forgotten by time, she was made forgettable. Hidden, distorted, pushed to the edges, not because she was irrelevant, but because she was dangerous to any system built on spiritual dependency. The early Gnostic streams did not present liberation as obedience to outer authority. They spoke of gnosis, direct knowing, lived recognition, the divine spark already present in the human being. That alone was disruptive. But then there was Sophia, the feminine current of divine intelligence, not as decoration, not as passive softness, but as the faculty that sees through illusion. The one who reveals falseness without asking permission from institutions, ideologies, or approved narratives. And that kind of wisdom has always threatened power. Because if human beings discover that the deepest truth is not owned by a structure outside them, then fear-based control starts losing oxygen. This is why Sophia had to be reduced, softened, marginalized, or recoded as error. This is why the world has spent centuries distrusting intuition, mocking deep inner knowing, treating the heart as weakness, and rewarding disconnection as if it were maturity. The suppression was not only theological, it became psychological, social, economic, technological. It became cultural air, an architecture of forgetting. A counterfeit reality so total that most people no longer even know they are inside it. And this is where it gets deeper. In the Gnostic vision, the problem was never just ignorance in the casual sense. It was captivity through misidentification. The soul forgets what it is and begins serving what it is not. The divine spark gets wrapped in false names, false urgency, false identity, false needs. You are trained to react instead of perceive, to perform instead of be, to consume instead of remember, to build a self that can survive the system while slowly abandoning the one thing in you that is actually real. That is why the old language of demiurge and archons still matters, not because you need a cartoon villain, not because every problem is a literal supernatural conspiracy, but because those symbols name something most people can feel but cannot articulate. There is a lower order of intelligence in this world, a counterfeit organizing force, a hostile pattern, a machinery that thrives when consciousness remains fragmented, exhausted, externally occupied, and cut off from direct knowing. Today, that machinery wears modern clothing, algorithms that study your impulses better than you do, dopamine loops that keep you stimulated but spiritually starved, emotional overstimulation that leaves your nervous system too flooded to hear anything subtle or true, identity engineering that turns personality into performance, pseudo-connection that keeps you socially active and existentially lonely, self-surveillance disguised as self-improvement, endless reaction cycles that make you feel involved while draining the very attention required for awakening. This is the prison of noise. This is the economy of fragmentation. This is the architecture of forgetting. And it benefits every time you confuse distraction for life. That strange fatigue you feel is not always from doing too much. Sometimes it comes from being kept too far from what is real. That is why your discomfort matters. Not all pain is pathology. Sometimes pain is the soul refusing distortion. Sometimes crisis is not the breakdown of the true self. It is the breakdown of your tolerance for a false one. You've felt this already, haven't you? The thinning mask, the static in the mind, the sudden repulsion toward fake laughter, recycled opinions, shallow busyness, scripted ambition, empty flirting, branded authenticity, conversations that sound like no one is actually there. Maybe you cannot explain it to people around you without sounding dramatic. Maybe even you have tried to label it stress, overthinking, depression, burnout, or just a weird phase. But the real sign is this: the surface life is becoming unbearable. Not because you are broken, but because something in you is becoming impossible to deceive. You are not losing your mind. You are losing your tolerance for distortion. You are not breaking down. You are becoming harder to program. You are not too sensitive. You are finally feeling what numbness used to hide. And in the ancient pattern, this matters, because Sophia does not return first as a spectacle in the sky. She returns as an event in perception, a shift in what you can see, what you can feel, what you can no longer agree to. The Gnostics encoded this in myth because myth can carry truths that literal language cannot. Sophia descends into fragmentation, and from within fragmentation, the movement of restoration begins. That means wisdom does not remain outside the broken world waiting to rescue it from a distance. Wisdom enters, suffers distortion, and then begins to awaken from within the very beings who have forgotten. That is why this is personal. Sophia is not merely out there. She is the buried intelligence in you that still recognizes truth when it appears. The ember under ash, the inner sight, the old texts, called a kind of living insight. The part of you that has always known when something was off, even when your mouth kept smiling and your habits kept cooperating. And yes, this is where the Christ principle enters, but not in the stale way people expect. In these deeper currents, Christ is not a demand for religious performance. Christ is the revealing light, the force that unmasks the prison and calls the spark home. Sophia is the wisdom that lets you recognize what the light reveals. One shows the false structure. The other teaches your being how to read it. One unveils. The other restores understanding. Not religion as control, but revelation as liberation. Not believe harder, but see clearly. And most people stop at this point. They hear words like Sophia, Christ, Gnosis, Archons, and either romanticize them or dismiss them. But none of this matters if it stays abstract. The real question is, why does this feel so relevant now? Why are more people feeling restless, disillusioned, emotionally overloaded, suspicious of the official script, exhausted by the speed and hollowness of modern life? because the conditions of our age intensify the exact forces the Gnostics warned about. We are living inside industrialized distraction. Attention is harvested, outrage is monetized, identity is manufactured, desire is manipulated. Time itself feels altered because you are constantly being pulled out of your own center and thrown into externally generated urgency. You are told to react instantly, consume endlessly, display continuously, compare compulsively, and call that being alive. But a soul cannot remember itself under constant assault. A nervous system cannot hear truth while occupied territory. A human being cannot receive wisdom while marinating in interruption. This is why so many people feel a strange mix of emptiness and overstimulation, full of input, starved of meaning, surrounded by contact, deprived of presence. This is not an accident. A distracted person is easier to govern than an inwardly coherent one. A fragmented self is easier to sell to, easier to frighten, easier to polarize, easier to keep asleep. The enemy architecture is subtle because it rarely tells you to betray your soul directly. It simply keeps you too busy, too tired, too emotionally hijacked, too externally defined, too addicted to friction, too afraid of silence, too scared of the unknown depth inside you. The soul stays externally occupied, and the system calls that freedom. But once Sophia begins stirring, the signs appear. Not as dramatic prophecies, but as changes in your tolerances, your reactions, your hunger. One sign is that superficial life stops feeding you. Things that used to entertain you start tasting like cardboard. Another sign is that meaning begins to matter more than pleasure. You start craving what is real more than what is stimulating. Another sign is that old identities begin cracking. The self you built to survive no longer fits the soul trying to awaken, and this part can feel brutal, because wisdom does not arrive to protect your masks, it arrives to expose them. The role you played to be liked, the language you use to avoid truth, the relationship you keep because it flatters the old self, the work rhythm that keeps you numb enough not to ask deeper questions, the version of you that knows how to function in the counterfeit life. Sophia is merciless with what is false, not because she is cruel, but because distortion cannot accompany you across the threshold. This is not punishment, it is purification. Not collapse, but correction. Not chaos for its own sake, but the cracking open of a room built to keep you asleep. And this is where it becomes a right, whether you use that word or not. Because if this reaches you at the right moment, then what is happening is not simple information transfer, it is anamnesis, remembrance. A re-entry into what your being knew before the world taught you to betray it. So don't just listen from the surface. Measure what becomes sharper in you as you hear this. Measure what feels named. Measure what you suddenly can no longer pretend not to know. There are moments in life when content is just content, and then there are moments when a message functions like a threshold. This is one of those moments for some of you, not because I say so, but because something inside you is already answering. Most people are waiting for a giant spiritual event while ignoring the more intimate truth. Awakening first appears in the small refusals, the moment you no longer laugh at what is empty just to belong. The moment you stop saying, "I'm fine," when your soul is signaling otherwise. The moment you put the phone down and feel the static in your body instead of anesthetizing it. The moment you notice how often your attention gets stolen and decide not to hand it over so easily. The moment you recognize that your reactions have been trained, your tastes have been shaped, your fears have been fed, your self-image has been engineered, and you say, quietly but clearly, no. That no matters. Sometimes the first rebellion is inward. Sometimes the holiest thing you can do is stop cooperating with what keeps you false. Sophia's return as an inner event means wisdom begins showing up not as grand mystical theater, but as clean refusal, clear seeing, honest speech, deeper stillness. and a strange new inability to sell yourself to the counterfeit life. And now, let's bring this all the way down into the everyday world, because this is where people either romanticize awakening or actually live it. The battle is not only in rare spiritual moments, it is in your habits, in your attention, in your speech, in what you normalize, in what you excuse, in how often you betray your own knowing just to keep the day moving smoothly. Every time you override the signal in your body to maintain a false harmony, you strengthen the architecture of forgetting. Every time you reach for noise, the second silence opens, you rehearse dependence on distraction. Every time you perform a version of yourself you no longer believe in, you donate life force to the false self. Every time you call exhaustion productivity, emotional flooding, engagement, and fragmentation just how life is now, you help the prison pass as reality. This is why modern life feels so spiritually expensive, not only because it is fast, but because it asks you, in 1,000 tiny ways, to trade essence for convenience, to trade depth for speed, to trade truth for social lubrication, to trade inward coherence for external approval. Look at relationships. How much of what people call connection is actually mutual avoidance? How many conversations are built to manage impressions rather than reveal reality? How many bonds survive only because both people agree not to speak from the deepest place? Look at work. How many people are praised not for integrity, but for how efficiently they can amputate their inner life and still produce? Look at media. How often are you invited to contemplate, and how often are you trained to flare up, scroll on, flare up again? Look at your own routines. How many of them are truly chosen, and how many are inherited reflexes that keep your spirit occupied just enough not to revolt? The terrifying thing is not only that the system distracts you, it is that after a while, you begin doing its work for it. You monitor yourself, you package yourself, you censor your own depth. You keep yourself fragmented because at least fragmentation is familiar. And yet the signal of awakening appears right there, in the middle of ordinary life, in choices so small the sleeping mind dismisses them. It appears when you refuse the impulse to check for stimulation and instead stay with the unease underneath. It appears when you tell the truth in a room where everyone is performing. It appears when you notice that a certain relationship only survives your self-betrayal and you stop feeding it with your silence. It appears when you choose not to react instantly, not to post instantly, not to defend a false identity instantly. It appears when you let an old mask die and do not rush to replace it. It appears when surface success starts feeling too costly because it requires the sacrifice of your inner signal. It appears when you can no longer tolerate falseness in your own mouth. That is the real battlefield. Not big beliefs alone, but attention, speech, habits, reactions, tolerance for distortion, and willingness to stay conscious in moments where unconsciousness would be easier. The war for the soul is fought in the micro-decisions. The architecture of forgetting depends on repetition, so does remembrance. Every small act of non-participation weakens the counterfeit world. Every moment of clear seeing reclaims occupied territory in the nervous system. Every honest pause becomes a crack in the false script. This is why your daily life matters more than your spiritual branding. This is why your discomfort matters more than your image. This is why the signal often arrives as irritation first. Because wisdom does not always enter like soft light. Sometimes it enters like holy intolerance, a refusal to keep living split in two. And once that refusal matures, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop fearing the loss of the false life. That is the turning point. That is the sign most people avoid. The moment when you no longer ask, "How do I awaken without changing anything important?" The moment when comfort loses its authority over truth. The moment when something in you says, "If this persona collapses, let it collapse. If this performance ends, let it end." If this counterfeit structure stops feeding me because I stopped feeding it, so be it. I would rather be real than well adjusted to a lie. That is not despair, that is initiation, that is the threshold. And when you cross it, Sophia is no longer an idea to you. She becomes embodied discernment, living wisdom, the faculty in you that cannot be seduced by surface alone anymore. Your choices change. Your attention changes, your relationships change, your standards change. The false world does not end because someone destroys it from the outside. It weakens when enough people withdraw their life force from what is counterfeit. Non-participation becomes revolt. Clarity becomes rebellion. Stillness becomes counter-warfare. Attention becomes sacred territory. So here is the practical turn. Give the signal room. Even 2 minutes of unoccupied silence matters if it is real. Sit without feeding yourself input. Ask, beneath the noise, what is true right now, not what is convenient, not what keeps the mask intact, what is true. Then watch where your body contracts around falseness. Watch where your speech gets edited to preserve an identity. Watch where you keep agreeing to what your soul has already outgrown. Ask what in your life depends on your self-betrayal to continue. Ask what would become possible if you stopped volunteering your attention to what depletes and distorts you. This is not a performance of spirituality. It is a discipline of remembrance. If one part of this has already been happening in you, mark it. Leave one word below, not for engagement, but as a record. A word that names what you now refuse to forget. Let that space become evidence that recognition is occurring in real time. And if this transmission names something you have been living but could not yet say, pass it to the person who keeps feeling that something is wrong with the world and cannot explain why. Not everyone is ready. But someone is waiting for language strong enough to meet what they already feel. And if you subscribe, do it in the spirit. This message requires, not as support for a channel, but as refusal to drift back into sleep. Turn on notifications, not for updates, but for transmissions, so the next signal does not have to fight as hard to reach you, because after this, the old state is harder to return to. Once you see that your attention is a battlefield, you cannot innocently waste it the same way. Once you feel that your exhaustion may be resistance to a false life, you cannot fully call it random anymore. Once you recognize that the world profits from your fragmentation, you cannot pretend the noise is neutral. And once Sophia is no longer a myth to you, but a living force of remembrance moving through your own perception, you cannot honestly say you were never called. You were. You are. And somewhere inside, you already answered.